Greetings, brothers and sisters. Shalom in Jesus Christ. God bless. Thanks for stopping by. If you haven't subscribed, please do. Give me a thumbs up, thumbs down, a comment, complaint, something, questions. I really appreciate it. Thank you. We've been talking about legalism and how I was made acquainted with that particular subject. I was made acquainted with that particular subject in my home church, where the stepdad was the pastor, who eventually became Micah, the minor prophet, in some form or fashion. And you know, when I look back on those times in the church and remember the things that were done, that were taught, all I can do is shake my head. Of course, I feel remorse, but I just shake my head. The best way to describe how I view those times now is, it's like when you become an adult and you look back on things you did in your childhood and you think, wow, that was fun then because that's all I understood, but it's so childish now. Because you've matured, you actually understand things more and you have more wisdom. At least that's the plan and the objective, is to learn more, to mature, and gain a little bit more insight and wisdom. So when I look back on these things that I'm sharing with you, it's like a mature adult looking back on very childish things. So legalism, in the previous video we were talking about that, and of course I explained how the sign was put on the front door from Deuteronomy 22:5. And, you know, how a man should not wear that which pertains to a woman, and a woman should not wear that which pertains to a man. And I explained that, of how I initially approached that. Well, as time went on, the subject would continue to come up. And so I said, well, what is that which pertains to a man and what is that which pertains to a woman? Because back in the biblical days, both men and women wore robes. And from what I could glean from history, there were some differences in the hymning and various things of that nature, but for the most part, the similarities were there. You know, they didn't have jeans and pants and khakis and maxi dresses and various styles of women's pants and shirts and things that we have today. And I realize, I'm not ignorant, I realize that the Bible has to be applicable to the time and the spirit of the age that it's revealed. But at the same time, we have to be very careful, because once again, and this is the foundation of the law as far as I'm concerned, even though it's righteous, it's holy, it's good, and it reveals the temptations and the deceptions that Satan will ensnare us with. But we still have to be very careful when we bring the law into the present day of grace under the finished work of Jesus Christ, because if we are guilty in one point of the law, we are guilty of the whole. So I asked the question, I said, well, what about shirts? A man's shirt compared to women's blouse. I said, there is some really similar designs there. I think one of the most pronounced differences is how a woman's blouse buttons compared to a man's shirt. A man's shirt buttons, let's see, how is it from, the buttons are on the right side, women's buttons are on the left side. Of course, there's t-shirts and tank tops and hoodies and sweatshirts, and oh my, in our time, in our society, the list is endless. And I realize that also in our time, in our society, women do purchase men's clothes in the men's department far more than men purchase women's clothes in women's department. And I brought up the fact that in that same chapter, Deuteronomy 22, forbidden to mix what? Wool with linen. So once again, the details and the intricacies of the law is going to jam you up somewhere, because The law was made to reveal the works of Satan and the self-righteousness of man by attempting to keep the law, which the Pharisees and Sadducees were guilty of. But we in ourselves will get jammed up every time. We cannot keep the law 100%. There was only one individual, one person that was able to do that. It's really windy out here. And that was Jesus Christ, the lawgiver himself in flesh. So each time we're going to paint ourselves into a corner, and you've got the style of shoes and the flip-flops and the sandals and oh my goodness, you're going to wear yourself out. And actually the end result of trying to find God's righteousness through keeping the law, the end result is this: hypocrisy. We're trying to be something and do something and accomplish something that we cannot do in our flesh. It's totally impossible. This flesh is corrupt. This flesh is sinful. Our carnal mind is at enmity against God. As long as we live in these corruptible bodies, these mortal corruptible bodies, we are in a spiritual warfare. So, legalism, well, it began to pervade and prevail in my home church. And so those are just a few things that I began to question and discuss and deal with. And of course, they didn't have the answers, because you can't have an answer. Like I said, it ends up in hypocrisy, and there's no righteousness that we can obtain and impress God with by keeping the law. You know, Paul, when he was referred to as Saul of Tarsus, when he was talking about his previous days as a Pharisee, he said, as touching the law, I was blameless, he thought, until he found out he was a murderer and guilty of breaking the whole law, because he was persecuting God's people. So, see, you can't win. You just went into televisions. William Branham, the Elijah prophet of this age, according to the Message believers, and I believed that at one time. I'm not going to shirk my responsibility for being a follower of that at one time. He was very much against televisions. His statement was he would never have one in his house, which we found out later was a lie. But he said he would never have one in his house, and if he did, he would blow it out the door with a shotgun. Well, Micah, the minor prophet, the stepdad, actually did that. He brought his television to the church with a shotgun, took it out the side door of the church, and actually shot the TV with a 12-gauge shotgun. I was there. I saw it. Well, that didn't last very long. It wasn't, I don't know, maybe a year or less, I don't know. And the TV slowly started finding their way back into the homes of the members of the church. And of course, back in that day, they didn't have cable and the internet as we do today. They had the big TV dishes that sat out in the front yard. And of course, the Secretary and Treasurer, he lived right on one of the main streets there in the town where I'm from, and only a few miles from the church, and he had one of the biggest TV dishes sitting out in his yard. So, like I said, you look back on those things and you think, how childish. And yet, everybody thought it was some great revelation, and everybody was becoming so righteous and so spiritual, and somehow this would impress God. Well, I'm 100% certain God wasn't impressed, and all the legalism that continued to invade the church to fall by the wayside for the most part. But let me interject another legalistic concept. William Branham also allegedly had a vision which was called Beyond the Curtain of Time. And in this vision, he said God allowed him to see the people that was coming up under his ministry. And he said they had long robes on down to their ankles, and the women had long hair hanging down their back, and the men had kind of shaggy hair just down on the fringes of their neck. And so Micah, the minor prophet, he took that vision and he began to teach a series of messages on women's dress and men's hair and women's hair. And he said, well, if God showed a vision of what the people look like on the other side, then isn't that the way we should emulate or copy while we're on the earth? Common sense tells you that a woman or a man should not present themselves sexually provocative to the public. You know, there's certain things about a man and a woman that's only for their husband and wife to have access to and to view. I mean, that's just common sense. And if a woman does go out and reveal herself in a provocative way, I would say that she's definitely being influenced by a spirit that's not Christ-like. But nevertheless, the stepdad got into women's dress, and when he got done, there again for a while, all the women began to wear maxi dresses and skirts down to their ankles and actually to the top of their feet, and long sleeves that went all the way down to the wrist and up to the neck. Nothing was revealed except pretty much the face and the hands and a little bit of the feet. So then my question was, the forever rebel, well, are you sure that's enough? There's other religions where the women are totally covered except their hands and just a little slit where you can barely see their eyes. Most of their face, 90% of their face is covered. And the garments are so bulky, you don't even see the shape of the woman's body. So are you sure that we're legalistic enough? I'm sorry, folks. I'm not laughing out of mockery. I'm just laughing out of like I said, I look back and I see the juvenile, the childish mindset that was going on back then. And each time he would bring up something and it would turn into some kind of a legalistic doctrine, it didn't last very long. It finally was kicked to the curb after a while, and everybody just went back to what they were doing, pretty much. Which, I mean, most of the women in the church, I mean, they dressed in a godly fashion. I'm not going to condemn that for sure, but these eccentric, radical, legalistic doctrines that he kept trying to introduce into the church, they just didn't last, which was proof enough that it's not going to work. Women had their dresses and skirts down to the floor, their sleeves down to their wrist, and their hair hanging down. He said, why do you put your hair up? He said, in the vision, all the women had their hair hanging down. And why would you put your hair on top of your head in a bun and show your ears and your neck if you have long hair, which should be hanging down? Well, once again, for a long time or for a while, the women all wore their hair down, hanging down to their back. And of course, that finally fell by the wayside too. And it started little by little, buns and French twist and ponytails and whatever. We'll get into some more of these really interesting legalistic doctrines as the videos continue. Thank you for stopping by and bearing with me. And I hope you're learning something out of these videos. And as always, God bless. Jesus Christ is the only way, the only truth, and the only life. And protect your freedom. Till next time.